My name is Paul, and I'm going to tell you a story. So it was during the second meeting with my radiologist when I turned to her and said, I suddenly have a lot more to live for. It was within the same month of 2016 that I found out that I had a cancerous tumor in my neck and that my wife was pregnant with what turned out to be my son. And, during treatment, I would sometimes find myself lost inside myself, gripped with fear. I wanted to be hopeful, but hope felt really dangerous. Hope felt scary. In order to connect with the idea of being a dad, I would envision holding my son as an infant and playing with him on the floor, running with him in the yard. And it sometimes seemed too painful to imagine that I might have to say goodbye to him, and maybe before he would remember me. And so I felt like I had to push those images outside. I had to distance myself from those images. It wasn't my first time at the MGH Cancer Center. I was there for 5 years with my first wife, Alice, as she battled ovarian cancer. And I was able to be with her until the very end. But now I was the patient, and I was doing radiation 6 days a week and chemotherapy once a week, and seeing the same people, the same faces, the same nurses, the same administrators, smelling the same smells, the alcohol as they would prep the IV, and listening to the same sounds, the low tones of the infusion machines. But more importantly, feeling that same fear, like that same fear throughout my whole body, like it would just, I'd feel it in every nerve. And it made me want to escape. And, then I'd go home to my wife, who was in her first trimester at the time. And neither one of us could eat, that I remember. So, in order to be the father that I wanted to be, I knew that I'd have to find myself, back in the present with my son. And I had to deal with that fear. So treatment was a success, but the ultimate test is time. I kept seeing doctors, I kept getting scans, I kept getting tests. And then came the day my son was born. He needed supplemental oxygen, which I found out is not unusual, it's not uncommon, but I freaked out a little bit. But then there I was holding his little body, his little fragile body, as he was finally breathing on his own and looking down at him. And a nurse just looked at me and said, "Babies teach us how to be present." And, as my son grew, I kept getting more scans, more tests, meeting with doctors, and kept dealing with that fear as it was cropping up. And when my son was 3, he suddenly seemed to develop a fear of the water. And he would sit by the edge of the pool during a swimming lesson, refusing to get in. And this went on for several lessons. Not inexpensive lessons. I tried to talk with him about it. We drew a comic about it at home, about the facing fears and the thrill of swimming. No dice, he wasn't getting in the water. This went on for a little while. And then I started to worry. What am I gonna do? What if he never learns how to swim? And what's the proper parenting response here, And, I had to, witnessing my son deal with fear reminded me of the ways that I dealt with fear in my own life, and sometimes the ways that I get lost inside myself. So I had to remember the guidance that I'd had from people and come back to the present. This was about him. And so I was able to come back to the present. I didn't demand he get in the water. I didn't say we were going to leave. I was just able to approach him with love and ask him about his feelings. And that was the day he got in the water. It turns out he loves to swim. So as time passed, it seemed like the cancer was not going to return. But there were times when I'd be out walking with my son, waiting for a phone call from a doctor or something like that, and that same fear would crop up, that same fear. And that feeling of wanting to get lost inside myself would be there, And I had to draw on what I learned from the important people in my life. You know, I had been sober, recovery from alcoholism for over 20 years, and a lot of the important people in my life were people who loved and supported me when I was a young man and I was very lost. And a very difficult person to love and support at the time. And I had to draw on, you know, years of therapy that I did and my own training as a psychologist, and most importantly, on the love of my son. You know, I realized it was in my fear of disappearance that I wasn't able to be present with my son right then and there. Like right in that moment, I wasn't able to be present with him. It was as if, you know, because of my fear, I was actually actualizing the thing that I was afraid of. And so I had to find the courage. I had to find the courage to come back to the present, to connect with him over and over again, no matter how scary it was. So my son is now 5, and his favorite game is hide and seek. He's gotten better at it now. And, you know, when he was younger, he would just put a curtain over his head or something like that. Now he actually finds places to hide, like good places to hide. And so we're in my apartment, and we're playing, and I couldn't find him. It took longer than usual to find him, and he was delighted. And when I finally found him, his eyes lit up, and he, you know, giggles and hugs me. And then we're taking a break, and we're in the kitchen. We're listening to ABBA while having a snack. We're listening to ABBA, okay? and the song Waterloo was playing, and the line from the song really caught my son's attention. The line was, "How can I ever refuse? I feel like I win when I lose." And how can you win when you lose, my son said. How can you win when you lose? And I had to think about that for a second, and I said, well, it's kind of like when we play hide and seek. When I can't find you, you're winning. You're winning by being lost, but you actually seem to like being found. You know, it's in fatherhood that I've really, it demands the capacity to be present and to connect, and in having to do that is the way that I've felt the most found in my life. But I could never have developed that capacity on my own. There was a lot of people who gave me the gift of their time, their presence, and now I just hope to be able to pass that on to my son. So I have that opportunity today. Thanks.